Okay, so we're tight with time, flash talk session. So hello everyone, my name is Maor and I will be the chair for this flash talk session about spectroscopy and microscopy. The way it would work exactly the same as throughout the day about regarding the questions. The talks, now the flash talk will be shorter, will be a 7-minute talk followed by 3 minutes for questions. So our first speaker is Guy Ruveni. Guy is a master student from the group of Omer Yafe from the Weizmann Institute and is the favorite master student of the group. I'm sure he will do a great job. So without further ado, Guy, good luck.
Okay. Hi everyone, thank you Maor for the kind introduction. So hi, my name is Guy, and I'm going to talk about the effect of the organic cation in lead bromide perovskite. Let me first start with our motivation, solar cells. So let me show you a schematic of a perovskite solar cell. And obviously we'll focus on the perovskite, the absorber layer of the solar cells. And we'd like to know, we all know that it's all about moving electrons inside the solar cell. That's what makes all the work done. Electrons and holes, charge carriers, and they move all around and they set all the important properties of solar cells. And everything that stands on their way will affect the final properties of the solar cell. So let's ask ourselves what affect this, the movement of these electrons. So if we lie on top of one of these electrons, what do we see? We'll probably see the whole atoms of this perovskite structure. And obviously they're not static as suggested in this image, but they are moving all the time, all around in finite temperatures, the working temperatures of the solar cell, and they will disturb the way of the electrons and holes, and eventually will do a match effect to the properties of the solar cell. So in my study, I'm focusing on this structure that you might have already seen today in a couple of previous sessions, the perovskite structure. In my specific study, I'm focusing on the lead bromide perovskite, meaning the inorganic cage has the lead and the bromide octahedra. And the A site cation, I'm focusing on two organic cations, methylammonium and formamidinum lead bromide. So from literature, we know that formamidinum lead bromide has some advantages over methylammonium lead bromide. And one that is specifically interesting for us was the ability to do self-healing. The self-healing property is the ability to recover after damage being done to the absorber layer, the crystal itself, to recover and work again. And this ability has some effect on the stability of the entire solar cell. So we ask ourselves in my study, what are the underlying structural dynamics, the vibrations that gives formamidinum better stability over methylammonium lead bromide? In order to understand and to learn the structural dynamics, a good method to do so is Raman scattering, which allows us to probe vibrations inside the crystal. And just as a short brief, I'll show you a schematic of Raman spectrum, so we can have a common language in the rest of this talk. So we have intensity at the left axis, and in the x-axis we have Raman shift. And in the Raman spectrum, every peak stands for one vibration. That's what you need to remember for this talk. And in this way, we can probe the vibrations inside the crystal. Let us start with the Raman spectra of these two materials at 300 Kelvin. So here we see the Raman spectra of both the formamidinum in red, methylammonium lead bromide in black. And this image does not similar at all to the schematic Raman spectrum I showed you a minute before. And let's try to think, why is this the case? So at 300 Kelvin, we have a lot of thermal energy and we have a lot of vibration of the atoms, meaning we cannot probe the real vibrations of the crystal. Therefore, we'll need to go down in temperature to probe the source for the difference between these two materials. So even though they look very similar, we have broad features and not singular peaks, as we used to see the Raman spectrum. They have some big difference here, which probably will be the cause for the difference between the two. So we'll need, as I told you, to go down in temperature and freeze these vibrations. So we're starting with cooling down the methyl ammonium from 300 Kelvin to 10 Kelvin in gaps of 20 Kelvin. And what we see, the Raman temperature-dependent Raman spectrum in every temperature. And we see the normal phenomenon we used to see in temperature-dependent. The phase transition is seen here from the abrupt change in Raman spectrum. And when we go down, I want to focus at the 10 Kelvin spectrum down here. We see the very well-behaved, separated peaks that we know from a normal behaving crystal. And on the other hand, when we do it for the former medium lead bromide, we get totally different image. We do not see phase transitions that can be seen in the methyl ammonium case. And the 10 Kelvin spectrum looks totally different. We have many, many peaks. And this also does not agree with XRD and theory. So we'll move on to see why is this big difference between the two. And now comes our hypothesis regarding the difference between the two. So the hypothesis focuses on the unit cell. This is the unit cell, as I showed before, the former medium lead bromide. And the unit cell, its definition reflects the fact that it repeats it's the repeating unit all over the 3D perovskite. And it should look the same, but this is not what the Raman spectrum is suggesting, because in this case, we will see less vibrations as should be from theory. On the other hand, what we see in Raman spectrum is kind of a supercell. That's what the Raman spectrum in 10 Kelvin suggests. The supercell is actually the idea of having a bigger unit cell with the A cation in adjacent former unit cells oriented in different way. In this way, we'll have higher configurational disorder, static disorder, that will reflect in the Raman spectrum that can be seen now in 10 Kelvin. And this thing is apparent all the way till room temperature. So to conclude, we ask what are the underlying structural dynamics that gives former medium better stability over methyl ammonium lead bromide. And we saw from the Raman spectrum at low temperature that the former medium has higher configurational disorder, which are prominently expressed in higher temperatures. All the way we can see this evolve. And this might affect the functional properties of solar cells and the stability in specific. Thank you all for listening.
Great, thank you very much, Guy.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Yes, please.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi, Tai. Thank you for the presentation. Maybe I missed it, but you did your calculation and measurement on single crystal or thin films?
Yeah, so I haven't mentioned it. I haven't done the calculations, if that's what you asked me.
The measurement was done by...
So it's done on single crystals, not thin films. Yeah, maybe I should have mentioned it at the beginning. Single crystals, we also verify it's single crystals using XRD, and our Raman measurements have another technique to show it's a single crystal to verify. Otherwise, it will be a big difference. Yeah, so single crystals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, so I guess we're short on time. So thanks, Guy.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next speaker, co-host. Okay. So our second speaker is Bharati Rajaswaran. Did I pronounce your name correctly? I practiced a lot. So, okay. Well, where is it? Sorry. So Bharati is a postdoc in the group of Professor Yaakov Tischler from Bar-Ilan University. So Bharati, the floor is yours. You can share your screen and begin. And you're muted, I think. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? You see my screen?
No, I don't think you shared your screen. Or maybe, oh, yeah, I see. Okay, sorry, my bad. Yeah, you can continue, you can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be talking about transition metal dichalcogenides, basically Raman enhancement in these materials. This is a work done in collaboration with Professor Daniel Nessim and Bar-Ilan. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is the way the talk flows. I'll be introducing these materials, set of these materials called transition metal dichalcogenides. And then I'll say what makes this work on these low frequency Raman measurements or Raman measurements in general, and then I'll share my results. So when it comes to low frequency Raman, so transition metal dichalcogenides, these are class of materials which are called layered materials. They are very exotic in terms of their properties, and they have a lot of promising applications. And they've also been demonstrated for many applications in the optoelectronics industry. And the kind of impact that these materials have in terms of citations or say publications, and also in the interdisciplinary nature is quite broad, and that's the reason why these materials draw a lot of attention. As I have shown here, the structure is basically 2D materials layers held by van der Waals forces, and I've just given a representative image of a structure here of tungsten diselenide. And we've worked on Raman spectroscopy, and this is just a brief outline of what Raman spectroscopy does. So we can actually understand a lot about the materials when we use Raman spectroscopy. What we have used is low frequency Raman in this study. Low frequency Raman is very important for these class of materials because I'll show you in the next slide that these materials can give rise to we get to know more about these materials in the low frequency range. What this slide tells here is, so when there is a light matter interaction, we have elastic scattering and inelastic scattering. And what we are interested in this, the inelastic scattering is what we is Raman scattering, and that's where we characterize materials with. But what low frequency does is we are interested in the low frequency range here. Why? Because transition metal dichalcogenides, because these are layered structures, they have atoms in the plane which can stretch, because of which we understand we get something called shear mode. And because they are also layered structures, they expand across the layers, the atoms, so we get what are called interbreathing or layer breathing modes. And these happen to be in the low frequency regime. These materials exhibit that in the low frequency regime, and that's why this low frequency Raman becomes very important for these kind of materials. And what I show here in this slide is how critical is the substrate choice that we use. So this is a classic example of silicon dioxide substrate, and we have a TMDC on top of it. In this case, it is molybdenum diselenide. From the low frequency regime, or if you have to understand the structure better or probe the structure better, we have these materials. We know the shear modes or layer breathing modes occur in the low frequency regime somewhere around 20 to say less than 100. But with silicon dioxide substrate, we are not able to actually see that. What we see is only a peak at 241 centimeter inverse Raman shifted. Whereas when we use a substrate like calcium fluoride, Raman grade calcium fluoride, all of these information about the low frequency pop up. All of this information, especially we get to know more of its structure, and this is also layer dependent. These are 2D materials and they can be grown layer after layer, like we can control the layer growth, and these are going to influence the properties they offer, and hence this becomes very important, and the use of substrate like calcium fluoride is very promising. And other than just the, other than probing the low frequency regime, even in the low frequency, there are different ways to enhance, because Raman being, we get very less signal out of Raman. There are many ways in which people work on enhancing the Raman signal we have. These are different ways people have actually looked at Raman enhancement. If you looked at dielectric substrates, and they have also looked at different stack of substrates to observe Raman enhancement, and the mechanisms are very different in each of these cases. And what we have done is taken a metal layer, and then we have taken metal oxide layer based on this rational being equation here. And then we have coated or deposited tungsten selenide of different layer thicknesses. And what we have observed is with respect to, say, layer thickness, and also with respect to the oxide thickness, we see prominent Raman modes occur at 350 and 423 for typical. This is very typical for tungsten diselenide. But when we change the oxide thickness, what we observe is for a particular oxide thickness, we see an enhancement in Raman signal. And for the same thing, for say 80 nanometer of the oxide thickness, we also see low frequency peaks popping up. So if we compare this, because we have drop cast different layers of materials, different layers of tungsten selenide, disulfide here, we have a 10-layer comparison, which is a 15-layer comparison. And we can clearly see for the oxide thickness of, say, 80 nanometer, we see 3 times higher enhancement. And for the 15-layer, we see close to 6-7 times enhancement.
So you have 1 minute.
Yeah. So to summarize, we have seen, we say that substrate choice is very critical if you have to probe low frequency regimes and TMDCs. And when we choose the right substrate, we can also see a good enhancement in addition to the low frequency regime. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bharati. Does anyone has any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, I think.
So can you show again the slide where you compare the different thicknesses of the aluminum oxide layer? Before that?
Yeah, sure.
One before, I think. Yeah, this one. So maybe I missed it. There is an enhancement of the low intensity peaks, right? As you increase the aluminum oxide layer.
Yeah.
So how do you know, I mean, is this low intensity peaks belong to the aluminum oxide layer, or you enhanced the peaks of the your 2D molybdenum disulfide material, and how can you distinguish?
Sure.
What is
I'm
it?
so sorry, I don't have that bare AL203 here. I don't have it right here, but I've done this Raman measurement on just AL203 bare substrate, like the stack alone. And I don't see these peaks belonging to, first of all, aluminum oxide doesn't have peaks right there corresponding. So these peaks also belong to tungsten disulfide, and we don't have peaks on alumina arsen here. I don't have the slide, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so can I ask additional question?
Sure.
If there is time.
Quickly.
Okay, so how the aluminum oxide layer enhance the Raman signal?
It's kind of interference effect. We have quarter interference. It's lambda by 4, and we have metal and metal oxide thickness correspondingly chosen. And all the metal is almost the same here, only the alumina layer is changed. So it's kind of interference effect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bharati. We'll move on to our last speaker. So our last speaker of today for this session will be Tamir Yeshurun. Tamir is a master student in the group of Dr. Gidon Segev from Tel Aviv University. Tamir, good luck, and you may begin.
Thanks. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for sticking in for the last lecture. I'm going to talk briefly about our method for extracting a spatial external luminescence efficiency in solar cells. And we do that by using photoluminescence measurements and optical modeling. So just a little bit of, yeah. Okay, so just a little bit of background. It's good to remember that the technology for solar energy conversion in solar cells is crucial when we face climate change. But most solar cells still suffer from a lot of loss mechanisms that limit their efficiencies. So if we see this figure, for example, we have examples of solar cells made from different materials. And over the years, we're getting close to the single material limit. But we still have a gap, and if we want to go towards the tandem limit, which is basically two solar cells back to back with different materials, we still have a way to go. And these loss mechanisms play a big role here, so it's getting crucial to understand them more. So if we look at for example, a tandem solar cell from two different materials, so unlike what Guy showed before, it could be complicated. So these loss mechanisms can come from the bulk, the different materials we choose, interfaces, surface treatments, and more. And so what we're trying to do is to map those efficiency losses, those loss mechanisms inside the solar cells in order to create a method for characterizing new materials and designs. So one of the ways to characterize the solar cell quality is to look at photoluminescence signals. So incident photons are absorbed and create electrons and holes. Those can recombine and emit a photon that is leaving the device, and that's what we call the PL, or the photoluminescence. But they can also recombine through non-radiative processes, and there's a lot of types, and also they can recombine through surface recombinations. So as PL is one of the ways to characterize the quality, we look at the external luminescence efficiency, which is basically a measure to look at the quality of the solar cell, and it's basically the PL divided by the absorbed photon flux. And why we look at this is because this is important because it's related to the efficiency, the theoretical efficiency we can get from a solar cell. So if you look here, for example, there's each dot represents a solar cell record efficiency that is made with the solar cell with different materials. And the lines show the theoretical limit that we can achieve when we have this number of external luminescence efficiency. So we can see here that we want to have to maximize this efficiency in order to be able to reach the maximum theoretical limit we can get. So something that is a little bit counterintuitive sometimes, but the solar cell, a good solar cell, needs to have efficient photon extraction. So some people say that a good solar cell is also a good LED. You can say a great solar cell comes with a great photoluminescence. So if we look at what is contributing to this external luminescence efficiency, it depends on the generation profile, which is here, the G, which says where and how many electrons and holes are being created. And this is multiplied with some sort of a probability of these electrons and holes to be able to leave the device and actually contribute to the PL. So the external luminescence efficiency is something that we can measure, and also the absorbed photon flux in the device we can measure. So if we measure those, we have this integral left, and the optical generation profile we can model. So we use optical modeling of the device to understand how is this profile is looking. And so when we have this, all we have left is extract this so-called probability. And so we call this the spatial external luminescence efficiency, because it gives us spatial information on how this external or what is affecting this external luminescence efficiency. And so this optical modeling can be a little bit sometimes simple, sometimes complicated. Each photon in the device can be redirected from every surface, can be reabsorbed, or it can just leave the device, but in a simple case. So here are a few samples of measurements that we did on gallium arsenide wafers and indium phosphide. And here we have the PL measurements, the photoluminescence measurements, and also the external quantum efficiency measurements of both of those. And so if we take those photoluminescence measurements and external quantum efficiency measurements, and we combine those with the optical modelings, we can extract the spatial external luminescence efficiency profile. So here we see what we had with the indium phosphide model wafer and measurements, and this is the profile we got. So we can learn maybe or see if we can learn a few things from here. For example, if we have surface recombination, more surface recombination means that there are less photons, less electrons to recombine radiatively and emit a photon that leaves the device, therefore would have a lower number. Maybe something like self-absorption. If, for example, we have a material that has a tendency towards radiative recombinations, then we can see this line would be higher. And all in all, we sort of got a depth profile of loss mechanisms. So if we have a more complicated device than just a wafer, we can see maybe spots or locations where the efficiency is being affected from. So to summarize, we saw that the photoluminescence and the external quantum efficiency, they carry significant information on the quality of a solar cell. We extracted this spatial external luminescence efficiency on a model system using indium phosphide wafers. And this spatial luminescence efficiency could help us quantify things such as surface recombination, self-absorption, and a total contribution to the efficiency. And we know that there is maybe more things here. So if you have any insights or idea, feel free to email me and we can talk about it. And yeah, basically that's it. Thank you. And I thank the entire group, and especially Maor and Gideon, that we worked on this project together.
Great. Thank you very much, Tamir. Any questions, everyone? Anyone? Time. Okay. So Tamir, maybe you can explain a bit about. So you're actually measuring the PL spatially, like you're moving the beam and moving it.
So our method is to extract it from this relation, right? We measure everything else, or we model the optical generation, and then we can extract the spatial external luminescence efficiency. We do not measure the in-depth, but this gives a method that we can basically use on complicated or more complicated devices, that it's not intrusive, or we can just measure the PL signals, and by doing this method, we can extract this spatial information.
So practically, like eventually, you would like as less efficiency as possible, right? Or maybe I'm getting it wrong.
As less efficiency of no, we wanted to have the more PL signal, the more photoluminescence a solar cell has in open circuit conditions, as in not connected to any circuit. That means that the electrons and holes inside don't recombine in other ways, and therefore when you actually operate the system or the solar cell, you would lose those. You would lose those electrons and holes.
Oh, okay.
So we want to have the more photoluminescence, the better.
So and to which efficiencies you got, like from these materials?
So yeah.
What type of efficiency, how high the efficiency can go to?
So if we look at this, for example, we see that people has been doing like, I don't know, what is this, hundreds? There's still a way to go. The highest is 1, or I mean 100%. That means that there's no other recombinations but radiative recombinations. And this is the theoretical limit, that the Shockley-Kaiser limit that everybody uses. But in practice, it's not that. There's a lot of other recombinations that make you lose efficiency. And so,
Okay, great. So thank you, Tamir, and thanks for all the speakers.
yeah, thank you.
For this session. And we're going for a break, I think, for 10 minutes, and then we have our second plenary talk, and you're all obviously welcome to join. Again, thanks everyone, and bye-bye.